Well, hey there, WellHouse Church. It's Pastor Cullen again with you. I'm excited to be with you again to start a new series this morning. Why don't you grab some coffee and some food and come join me for our time of teaching? Because today I want to talk to you about fruit. We're starting this new series where I am going to track the metaphor, the story of fruit throughout the scriptures. Because if there's anything I know about storytelling, it's that the things that are introduced to you in the very beginning of a story's plot line are some of the most important. Simple truths of the Bible for that would be that God creates the world. Another simple truth of that would be that what God makes is good. And that there's fruit involved in the very beginning of the story. So I want to go through and track this story, this metaphor of fruit that goes throughout the narrative. And I think the reason it's so impactful is because there's so many things in the beginning of the narrative that we know, that we're confident of. We're confident that God makes humanity in His own image. We're confident that God makes the world. We're confident that when God makes the world, He says that it is good. In fact, He says that it is good 7 times. It is perfectly good. There's nothing within it that is not good. It is good and very good. And the reason we know all those truths is because that some of the most profound truths of any story come in the very first pages. Well, for whatever reason, there are less and less people talking about the fact that there's fruit. Fruit is recorded in the very first pages. On day 3 of chapter 1, God asked that the newfound earth, the world that He has made, that it might bring forth vegetation that would bear fruit. Isn't it interesting that in God, this creator, sustainer, giver of life, He goes about and He can make anything He wants, right? That's kind of what makes Him God. And yet He chooses to make a world that yields fruit. Something that tastes good, something that's life-giving, something that's good for nourishment and sustenance, and something that continues to yield. Fruit yields more and more fruit. Well, along those same lines, it's interesting to me that in Genesis chapter 1, God makes Adam and Eve, and the text says, in verse 27, so God created humankind in His image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. So God makes humanity, male and female, in His own image. And in making them in His image, the first command He gives to them is to be fruitful and multiply. Now, we know that to be a command of procreation, of giving life. But my question to you is, why would God say that in such a way of using the language of fruit to communicate that truth? There are lots of ways that the story could have been recorded of how that might be explained to the first humans. But the text puts it in the context of fruit, something we've already been introduced to. Now, I don't have a great answer. That's one of the reasons I want you to come along this journey with me as we look at the narrative and metaphor of fruit throughout the scriptures. But something that I notice is that just like what God is asking of Adam and Eve, the rest of that verse, verse 28 says, God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every other living thing that moves upon the earth." You see, what I think the text is communicating to us is that the earth continues to yield and give back to its creator. Each of the things that God has made has an element of procreation to it. And so, this idea of fruit bearing is that there's something happening within us, and as that happens within us, we pour out of ourselves in honor back to our Creator, to be fruitful and multiply. That is the rhythms of the world as we know it. And so it only makes sense that the narrative records God's commands to the first humans to be fruitful and multiply. May you yield something out of this beauty, this paradise, this goodness that I've given you. May you live your life in such a way to give back to me. May you live your life in such a way that you bear much fruit, that you yield life and sustenance and goodness. May you live your life in such a way that the goodness of God revealed in creation is found in you, in the way you carry your life and conduct your life. That the goodness of God displayed in the first chapter becomes embodied in you, His most magnificent creature. So church, today I want to ask you, do you believe that you're made in the image and likeness of God? And if so, how are you yielding and bearing fruit? How are you, in your experience of life, doing things of life that bring about more life? We believe God to be the God who is the author, creator, and sustainer of life, and we are called to be in His image. I think there's a very real way that we go about living that we go about yielding and bearing life together. And so I'd love to hear from you how you are going about, through all the trials and troubles, trauma, pain that we endure in the world. I'd love to know how you are bearing fruit, how everyone around you is looking at you and seeing the goodness of the Creator. As He has given life to you, you give life back to Him.